Elizondo really ran what he says is a secret program.
You've actually seen alien technology.
I have. I saw a technical device that had been removed by the Department of Veterans Affairs from a U.S. military service member who claimed to have a UAP encounter. The physician claimed the object tried to evade being excised.
So let me get this right. Whatever it is, it's a constructed object.
It's a technological object enveloped in some sort of biological capsule.
It's really unbelievable what he is accusing. I think you might be wondering,
what is his background? What is his motivation for actually coming forward?
He began his career in the Army. He worked as a counterintelligence special agent. I mean, this is a public servant, right? I think he wants the truth to be told. And then he moved on to advanced aerospace counterintelligence program that was inside of the Pentagon.
What we know is that it's not us humans.
What do you find, though, the most plausible explanation?
Well, I mean, these things could be just as natural as we are. They could be from the oceans. We don't know.
So it may not be alien at all?
No, this is my point.
You've actually seen alien technology.
I have.
We have to be careful because
he worked as a counterintelligence special agent.
We always assume
a counterintelligence special agent. He wants the truth to be told.
Well, if it's not human, it's alien. Well, let's back up for a second, because what's your definition of alien? Remember, when we started sailing the ocean blue and people said there were sea monsters, we laugh about that now. Oh, sea monsters. But you know what? They're called blue whales and great white sharks and the great squid of the Pacific, and they're not really monsters. They're part of our natural environment. Is it possible these things were from outer space? Sure. Is it possible they're from underwater? Sure. Is it possible that they've been here all along? Sure. We don't know yet.
The government says that he worked as a counterintelligence special agent. They do not have credible evidence.
To become an expert, you can't just sit in an armchair and say,
I was a counterintelligence officer.
Don't take this in the wrong way.
It requires looking through journals.
But now I've had enough.
That's what we have learned is that
We do things always your way.
Worked as a counterintelligence special agent. I mean, this is a public service.
I see, I get it, I know.
Elizondo really ran counterintelligence, and they continue to deny all of the allegations that
Nikola Tesla's actual wireless transmission system did not rely on transmitting energy through the air using
radio waves.
Instead, he proposed a system that leveraged the natural conductive properties of the Earth.
I'm going to read you just my opening line here.
And this is where we are.
Okay, now that it's just us here, let me illustrate a point that many of you might have already caught. Skeptics and material science often ignores the study of things that hoaxers have been caught perpetuating. They see the scam and they call it debunked because,
well, I know a subwoofer when I see one. You know, only everything I'm talking about with all my theories here is to do with vibrations put into the ground, you know, acoustics in the ground. No. Speakers wouldn't be used at all in this, and it wouldn't possibly be related to this, and wouldn't possibly need to have some sort of cover program where they claim, oh, these flying saucers are also these exact things that look like speakers too. Those if acoustic waves can't be used for anything. Oh my god. They just use so many layers for subterfuge on this. It's kind of brilliant, and it's impressive, the work they've put into this. I'm getting tired of this, though. We need to use this so we can heal our planet and fix our shit. And yes, they absolutely would use it for cover for both vibrations in the ground and...
I'm just gonna go and ruin everything they're doing.
¿Por qué no los dos?
which is why he's stepping forward.
All the flying saucer disc nonsense that's spread all seems like explicit cover for Tesla disk turbine propulsion systems. Even the pictures of real UFOs, those are faked pictures because really some dude went out in his yard and threw a metal plate up into the air. If your whole confidential project was built around Tesla turbines and you wanted to give the illusion of like aliens or whatever nonsense, you take one of the discs, toss it in the air. Got a flying saucer. Spread tons of news all over the country about flying saucers and aliens, and anyone mentions the word disc, whether it's planned or not. Oh my god, you know about the flying saucers?
You can come up with whatever theory you want.
Get another image of a separate UFO being called the chandelier.
What was the most impressive thing to you about this video?
It makes no sense. It is just the most bizarre structure with no purpose. It has everyone across the intelligence community just asking questions and trying to figure out what this thing is. No wings. There's seemingly no place for anyone to sit on. It's just a bizarre shape.
All right, we have the picture of the chandelier UFO, as it's being called. Where's the video, Jeremy?
I think I'm going to have to answer that at another time, but I will say there is more footage. So some people got to see portions of it within the intelligence community. The object did go into the water, and then it did come out and shoot off at an extraordinary speed.
Wait, are you talking about
The propellers only have to spin 180 times a minute to move enough water to propel it.
Self-rights itself, then it can spin the propellers,
and then it takes off into the air like a normal drone.
In fact, that was a lie, and it is now an admitted lie by our own
Jeremy Corbell?
There are craft that are performing maneuvers, a mechanistic turn, moving in a way that is counterintuitive to our own aeronautics. This has to be a gravity-propelled craft.
It's rotating.
Exactly the propulsion system that Bob Lazar described.
Jeremy Corbell.
Like a fucking
physicist
to you? No, it doesn't. I know I'm clearly not doing any more digging into any particular topic.
Wait a minute. Corbell has a degree from Santa Cruz in quantum study. Finding a lot of people within this circle that should know about this, but just don't happen to understand it all. They can't figure it out. Usually that's a master's and PhD focus. Can't find anywhere that he's got a master's. Certainly doesn't use the word doctor on his name. I'm not saying he didn't. What is this degree that you've got, bud?
Just ridiculous.
It is counterintuitive to our own aeronautics.
Absolutely not true. We have gyroscopic stabilizers for satellites because in space, for the satellite to turn, it pushes on the gyroscope. In the physics lab that I taught at Michigan Tech, this was the favorite lesson I like to teach. Use a really cool steering around when you're turning. First week stuff in physics here, Jeremy. Tesla's flying apparatus pack talks about using high-speed dual Tesla turbine, works as a gyroscope stabilizer. And if you go watch Travis Taylor's show about Tesla,
Travis Taylor, Jason Stapleton, Charlie Moses. So this is a patent from Nikola Tesla. How feasible is something like that? The concept is certainly innovative and it would work. Big problem I see is there's no way to counteract torque there. It's in a tail rotor.
You don't need it.
You clearly want to make some, so why not just make it?
Because I'm scared.
Of what?
I don't know.
Exactly. Just make what you want to make.
In the patent, Tesla says you could do a multi-prop rotor across the wing.
You know what the solution is, mate?
What's that?
Internal combustion. It's the solution to everything. Speed and power.
Aircraft, we have two prop rotors spinning that counteract the torque from each other.
Bravo Zulu, Colonel.
Or another problem. Okay.
Travis, I don't know how many times I'm going to catch you not doing your homework. It's right in the patent.
The Air Force has made an art form of ridiculing people who have talked about this thing. They've done an excellent job of covering it up for the last 40 years. George, basically what we're dealing with here...
In March 1989, he accompanied a small group to Area 51.
Did you see that move it did?
No, I didn't.
It went like
It had a poster, and it looked like a commercial poster almost, like it was lithographed, and you could buy it at a Kmart or something.
The Air Force has made an art form.
And it had the disc that I coined the term the sport model. Was lifted off the ground about 3 feet at area S4. When I was let in, it was the first time I saw the sport model. I was told they could have walked me in the front door, but they purposely wanted to walk me by it. I was told not to say anything and just keep my eyes forward and walk past the disc into the office area. As we went by it, I just kind of stuck my hands on it just to run it alongside the thing. That was about the smallest time.
The Air Force has made an art form of ridiculing people who have talked about this. They've done an excellent job of covering it up.
Security at S4 used fear and intimidation almost as a brainwashing tool.
Did everything but physically hurt me.
This is based on what I've come across after intense research in the last year.
A solid cylinder is not even a solid cylinder. It consists of many discs stacked up, and these are fused together to produce that. And all of these discs that were cut at unusual angles. Now, if you don't do all this, that doesn't work. So, unfortunately, that's the extent of my knowledge on this. This makes no sense anywhere. That's what it takes for it to operate. In a small reactor, directs it through the archways into the emitters and allows it to propel the craft for whatever use they want.
I don't believe a word of this. Do you expect people to believe this?
No, I'm not going to change anyone's mind. I'm just Relaying, it's true.
Did you know that the Tesla turbine is reversible in not just one way, but two?
It's true.
Firstly, without any complex means like a reversing gear, the turbine can be spun in the opposite direction. All that is needed is for a switching mechanism to change the direction in which the fluid comes spiraling in. Normal bladed turbines can't do this due to the blade geometry design. Secondly, the Tesla turbine is also said to be reversible because it can work like a centrifugal pump or compressor. The rotor can actually be spun to propel the fluid along with the discs as they rotate. Or option number 3, Travis Taylor is in fact working with the Air Force currently.
You'll say to yourself, my gosh, the son of a gun was right.
Well, there goes Andrew Bustamante, a known CIA agent. Definitely have some counterintelligence agents out here.
It's surprising to us in a lot of ways. First of all, really, in just how much it seems to be under the radar.
Bustamante.
We didn't really hear of it much either. We came across it in our research and found out there's a long history of high strangeness and significant military presence. As we started digging into
Bustamante,
found as it has
counterintelligence agents. Yes. They absolutely would use it for cover for both vibrations in the ground and...
Just gonna go and ruin everything they're doing.
¿Por qué no los dos?
If they aren't already, navies should be using Tesla turbines for direct propulsion as stealth trolling motors and auxiliary power units to power onboard electronics. When the Tesla turbine, or tester for short, is designed correctly, it has no windage or almost zero turbulent losses between the disks. Tesla himself even believes so. Such a prime mover possesses many advantages, both constructive and operative. It is simple, light, compact, subject to little wear, and exceptionally easy to manufacture, as small clearances and accurate milling work are not essential to good performance. In operation, it is reliable, there being no valves, sliding contacts, or troublesome vanes. It is almost free of windage, largely independent of nozzle efficiency, and suitable for high as well as for low fluid velocities and speeds of revolution. Wow, that all sounds amazing, doesn't it? But what does that mean? What exactly is windage anyways? Windage refers to the flow losses created as a fluid moves over the surface of an object. In the case of a traditional bladed turbine, as the blades spin at high rotor tip speeds, it disrupts the surrounding fluid flow, leading to turbulent vortices forming at the tips of the blades. These turbulent vortices have multiple adverse effects. They reduce efficiency, cause vibration, and produce noise. Turbulence at the blade tips equates to lost kinetic energy, diminishing the efficiency of the turbine. The whirling vortices can cause the turbine parts to violently vibrate, which puts additional wear and tear on the system. These vibrations further propagate out as sound waves. This means windage causes a high level of operational noise, which is not ideal for stealth submarines that rely on being undetectable. Think about the iconic high-pitched whine of a bladed turbojet when the rotors are spinning at high RPM. Every blade tip essentially gives off a little flapping noise. Extensive and expensive CFD modeling is done to reduce these windage losses, but it's never perfect. Some drone thrusters in fact choose a high blade number count and high RPM so that the flapping frequency coming off the thruster is higher than the human hearing. But while that's a neat trick for hiding the sound from our human ears, it doesn't get rid of the sound for robot ears that can listen in a full broadband spectrum. Even more in the optical spectrums, there are minor EM field variations from each blade tip that could potentially be detected by enemy vessels if the active EM shielding that military naval vessels use falters or outright fails. In contrast, the uniform shape of the flat and thin discs in the tester has no external geometry to give off acoustic or EM field oscillations or variations as it rotates. The tester further minimizes these problems by leveraging the principles of laminar flow. Laminar flow is a fluid flow regime characterized and governed by viscous forces within the fluid, as opposed to turbulent or chaotic flow regimes characterized and governed by the fluid's kinetic energies and momentum. In laminar flow regimes, fluids move in parallel layers with minimal mixing, which generates dramatically less sound as well as mechanical vibrations. A key factor in achieving this laminar flow lies in the spacing between the turbine's discs. Like in a laminar flow nozzle that uses many straws to straighten and align the bulk flow direction of the fluid, the thin parallel disc spacing similarly straighten the bulk flow of the fluid through the turbine as well as eliminate any turbulence or eddies between the disc faces. Even more so, the tester disc stack itself can act like an acoustic baffle for any fluid turbulence in the nozzle, which all bladed turbines coincidentally suffer from in their stationary or stator blades too. With these benefits in mind, it's easy to see why I believe the tester could be the quietest turbine ever devised. But wait, there's more. Here's the kicker. You may have heard of supercritical fluids, but not know what they are. Simply put, the supercritical point of a fluid is the pressure and temperature point that above which there is no phase state change between a gas and a liquid. Conveniently, that means supercritical fluids have properties of both liquids and gases. Now, why does this matter? Supercritical fluids, like those coming out of a nuclear reactor cooling system, have an added bonus of having the thick viscosity of a liquid, but can also expand like an elastic gas in a turbine Brayton cycle. When built right, testers having a motive fluid with the viscosity of a liquid means it will get an insane amount of torque, even at low RPMs, and it wouldn't even need tight disk spaces because of the thickness of the supercritical fluid. Corollary, an elastic supercritical steam expanding in a tester via a Brayton thermodynamic cycle has a higher thermal efficiency than a typical steam Rankine cycle, because no energy must go to the latent heat of vaporization needed for the liquid water to change phase to the gaseous steam, which is what limits the thermal efficiency of a normal steam Rankine system in the first place. This thermal efficiency limit of steam Rankine cycles is because of the latent heat of vaporization and condensation in the steam that is not usable for expansion to get mechanical energy out at the turbine shaft. Furthermore, on top of it not being useful for power out from the turbine, it still needs to be removed from the fluid in the condenser to reduce the pressure of the exhaust of the turbine. This makes the supercritical steam perhaps the best motive fluid for the tester. This is especially so for metallic discs, as the conductive metals are usually naturally hydrophilic, meaning readily attractive to polar H2O molecules. This creates a good molecular adhesion and grip of the motive fluid to the disc faces, further reducing slip of the fluid on the discs and increasing torque in an efficient manner. Because the unique viscous and elastic properties of supercritical steam, the turbine will be able to generate an immense amount of torque, even at low RPMs, and do so not just with a high isentropic efficiency, but with a very high thermodynamic efficiency. Some might argue that all these benefits might be null if the tester isn't actually efficient, but here's my counter. Even if the tester wasn't the epitome of efficiency, the nuclear reactors on these ships have more fuel than the ship will use in its lifetime. When the objective is to be as quiet and stealthy as possible, efficiency takes a back seat. To put it in perspective, think about the afterburners in a fighter plane turbojet engine. They're not designed for efficiency with the prodigious amount of fuel they burn. They're designed for speed. To bring this back to nuclear-powered submarines, they care primarily about noise reduction. Traditional bladed turbines will always have some windage and vibration, requiring passive and active noise canceling on the submersible vessel. The Tesla turbine, however, doesn't have these issues. So here's my bottom line. If they aren't already, Navy should be using Tesla turbines for direct propulsion as stealth trolling motors and auxiliary power units to power onboard electronics. And as an added bonus, they should just go ahead and ditch all the bladed propellers and use the tester disc stack as water thrusters, providing a quieter and smoother underwater propulsion system. In summary, when designed correctly, the Tesla turbine offers a revolutionary way to achieve both quiet and efficient operations, something I believe no bladed turbine or propeller could compete with. To bring the turbine a little bit closer to a final point, and even a little bit closer to Bob Lazar's theories here, if the motive fluid going through the turbine has two opportunities to expand, once in the nozzle and then once through the spiral pathway, if it's still expanding through the spiral passageway, there's what's known as the reheat factor. With the fluid moving faster than the discs at the tips as it comes in, there is a heat that's generated from the viscous friction and even just friction within the casing. That heat generated can still further be reutilized and recouped through that spiral section as the fluid continues to expand. What that means is, if we get heat that's still being generated inside the turbine that is possible for expansion, imagine if the discs were radioactive. So just the discs generated the heat. You don't need a boiler or reactor on the side. The turbine is the reactor. Why do you think they always want to run around and get all the discs? Anyone in these plane crashes, if they ever have one go down, they race to get the discs, because those discs are radioactive. Bob Lazar talks about how you have to cut them a special angle. It's usually because you grow high-end turbine parts from single crystals and machine them down from that. Single metallic crystals. So what that means is, I don't know quite enough metallurgy to fully explain this, but I have to imagine there's just some sort of radioactive metal. Heck, you could probably even just use all the waste stainless steel that's just radioactive after being used in a regular nuclear reactor. Anyway, basically you make special radioactive, let's just go, special single crystal uranium discs that go inside of a special designed casing that works as a control rod. You could make this work in any number of ways, where it either like clamshells further over top of the casing that closes on it, and the more you close the clamshell on it, the more the turbine just keeps spinning up because it just starts heating up. And if you need to slow down, you pull the clamshell moderator off of it. Oh my god, I can literally think of the demon cord just on top of the turbine. You want it to go faster, you close the cord. You want to go slower.
I have no idea, sir, but if we don't open the iris...
The next thud we hear will be voice.
Close the iris.
Close the iris if necessary.
But then also for the discs, we're going to grow them in the single crystal, have the crystalline structure being in a certain angle on the full growth. And when you cut your discs, you got to cut them along that one angle on the crystal that's being grown. It might have the highest tensile strength along that axis of the crystalline structure, or the crystalline metallic lattice. Regardless, it makes it super cool. Radioactive hot discs. They are the heat. You just push fluid in. If it expands on the way out, it'll get power out.
Element 115 was what we would call the fuel, what provided the power for the reactor to work. Element 115 produces its own energy. It had a very specific manufacturing technique. Its code name was LA-1000. That's what it was referred to, off-site. Its purpose was supposed to be, again, this is just a code and deception, was supposed to be an advanced armor. So it's an unusual material, so now we can take it to a national lab. This is LA-1000 classified material. It's a very advanced armor. That takes care of all weird questions. So, you immediately start operating on lies. This fuel is somewhat copper in color. That reddish, brownish. The way this is manufactured is really critical. It's not just cut out of a heavy sheet of material.
Lanolin? Lanolin, like sheep's wool? Lanolin, like sheep's wool?
Fuel cells and so on. You're running your car on
hydrogen. You can't run a car on water.
But you're using water.
Right. You use water as the source material. You run electricity through it, and it breaks it down into hydrogen and oxygen, and then you can burn the hydrogen.
All right, so you found a way to store a lot more hydrogen in hydrate. The equivalent of a full tank of gas. You want to fill up your car. How much hydrate do you need?
Well, I'll show.
No way.
Yeah, that's the volume it takes to store enough hydrogen to propel this car close to 400 miles. Just about what it gets running on a full tank of gas.
Wow.
And it's a lot safer than gasoline.
Really?
Yeah, these tanks can be shot at with incendiary bullets or cut in half with a chainsaw, and you can throw a match on them, they just smolder like a cigarette. Now, you can't say that about a gas tank. Now, if you store hydrogen and just compressed gas in a tank, it certainly explode, catch on fire. Here, only the hydrogen that you need is released from the tank. When the tank's heated, it produces hydrogen, and the car burns it. So there's never much gaseous hydrogen in the system at any given time.
Wow.
This provides power to the heater in the tank, and also reads back the temperature of the tank.
Why is that important?
Well, when you apply heat to hydride, it releases hydrogen. So as power is applied to here, it heats the hydride, and then the gas comes out, the big hose is on the end.
You have 4 hoses. Do they all mix into one big hose or something?
Because you can only get hydrogen out of hydride at a certain rate with a certain temperature. And a single tank, you can't get it out at the volume you need. So you really just split it into 4 smaller units, heat them separately, and it works just fine.
And behind me, Bob is getting ready to blow something up. Bob is blowing up water. Well, okay, he's not blowing up water because, as he said, to say you're powering your car on water is the same thing as saying that you're running your car on gasoline. You're powering your car on dinosaurs, and we know that's what it means. This is what?
This is a Hoffman apparatus.
And it's used to
produce hydrogen and oxygen from water.
For fun, just because it's cool.
Well, if you just have it used for hydrogen and oxygen or for demonstration purposes, it works just perfect. All you got to do is fill it with water.
That's just regular water, right?
Well, actually, water with a little citric acid, potassium hydroxide, anything like that. The more conductive you make the water, the faster hydrogen will come out.
And each one of these sides is supposed to be hydrogen and oxygen.
Right. One will be hydrogen will bubble up out of one, and oxygen will bubble up out of the other. Remember, water is H2O.
Right.
So when we break the bond of water apart, we'll get twice as much hydrogen gas as we do oxygen.
Oh, and there'll be more on this side?
Yes.
That's the hydrogen side.
Exactly. And that's the negative.
Oh, so it matters which way you hook these up. So you got to hook up positive to what is the positive going to make?
Positive will make up the oxygen, and the negative will make the hydrogen.
Okay.
So we've just connected it there,
right?
And just by turning it on, you can see bubbles start pouring up out of there.
They're 7 up. So those bubbles are, well, they're not the same. So these are hydrogen bubbles, and those are oxygen bubbles.
Right.
And this is wider. There's more of them.
Right. Well, you can see it's really.
Why is there more? Oh, H2.
Oh, right. There's twice as much. Hey, that actually makes sense. So we'll close it off so it saves, seals the gas in, and then you'll see it'll start filling up.
Oh, we don't have to go away overnight if this is what we're watching?
Yeah, it'll be relatively quick. And what we'll do is take a little sample of the hydrogen gas and light it.
Right.
You can see.
What are these? You just have electrical current going to a
it's a piece of platinum foil, and the reason you need platinum in there is because it's very corrosive to a metal for electrolysis to occur. I mean, it's really ripping the atoms of the metal apart, but platinum is highly resistant to corrosion. Now, this is a slow method.
Right.
And, you know, it consumes a fair amount of electricity. Now, if the electricity is being produced from solar panels or a wind generator, it doesn't cost you anything, so who cares? But still, you don't want to wait, hours and hours and hours and hours to refill a vehicle. You want something that can produce hydrogen at a fairly quick rate. So let's go ahead and extract some of this.
Okay. Look at that.
Wow. So there's power of hydrogen. Well, there's a standard gasoline fill, but also there's a hydrogen in it, which you just click on, leave it on overnight, and as the generator makes hydrogen, it compresses it in there at a nice slow rate, and the tanks become full over a period of about 8 hours or so. There are little points here and there that do have to be addressed. I mean, when it comes right down to it, you don't want fuel tanks inside the vehicle. This is a prototype, so ideally, eventually, you'd want the tanks outside, just like a fuel tank is. The second thing is you're dealing with an unusual gas. Hydrogen not only is lighter than air, but also it burns with an invisible flame and is completely odorless, which is not a good thing. Now, propane is odorless too. They add that pretty strong scent to it. And you can't really do that with hydrogen, because if you add any kind of chemical to it, the hydride has a problem storing it. It can poison the hydride and lose its ability to hold hydrogen. So that's something that needs to be addressed. You have a hydrogen leak and somehow the gas is getting in the car, you'd never know. And it could accumulate in the car. You go to light a cigarette, there could be an explosion in a case like that. So you need things like a hydrogen gas detector, so it'll let you know if there is a hydrogen leak. But I mean, it's still an extremely safe system.
Why can't everybody do this? I mean, gas is going at $5 a gallon.
Right.
It's terrible. The whole country's falling apart. We're killing people all over the world for oil. And this, you're driving a car on this, and you can do it, and you can convert any other car.
Yeah, unless I'm sure there are cars that have some technical problems, but yeah, essentially any car can be converted. The whole problem to it is the material in the hydride. The hydride itself, one of the main components of it, is classified as a weapon material, and it can only be used in thermonuclear weapons. And because, even though it's not a dangerous material, explosive or anything by itself, just because it's used within those nuclear weapons that are obviously secret and the components thereof, but because it's used in those, it can't be used for any other civilian purposes. So you can't even purchase the material.
No.
Which is why we had to make it.
You made it?
Yeah, we made it.
But isn't that, don't you need big particle accelerators and things?
So that was the one loophole. You can make the material, you can't buy it. So
where's the particle? You have a particle accelerator?
Yeah, so all you have to do is build a particle accelerator and you can make all the hydride you need.
The biggest thing that stands in the way right now is just getting that material inside the tank, that hydride material.
Right.
And the reason you can't is because
it's a weapon material.
But there's nothing dangerous about it.
No,
it won't blow up.
A weapon, right.
Well, beryllium's used in a weapon too,
Right.
Basically, this whole thing boils down to how you store the hydrogen. So we found a metal. We have a material that we can store the hydrogen in.
We have a material we can safely store hydrogen in, and a sufficient quantity to replace the gas tank on a car. So we can provide enough hydrogen to drive a car as you normally would. Use green energy to make the hydrogen, either solar or wind power. There's a medium to store it in. That's it. Both problems are handled. All the other little bells and whistles can be taken care of in time, but the basic system works. It has for a long time.
Wow.
That's it.
Man, if we had just a fraction of what the oil companies are wallowing
we
in
had
right now.
the budget of one day in Iraq, this entire system would be available to everybody.
Hafnium isomers, atomic nuclei pumped up on steroids and ready to explode. But what exactly is this microscopic stick of dynamite? Hafnium isomers are forms of the metal hafnium, in which the nucleus has the same number of protons and neutrons, but the energy stored in the nucleus is cranked up to insane levels. The nucleus acts like a tightly compressed spring under huge tension and just looking for any excuse to violently unwind. The most promising isomer is hafnium-178m2, packing 2.5 million electron volts of nuclear energy in each atom. With that much zip-locked up, hafnium isomers have more spark than plutonium atoms.
Internal conversion electrons. Internal conversion is a form of de-excitation, where an excited nucleus changes from an excited state to a ground state. When this occurs, excess energy is released and directly transferred to an orbital electron, which is usually from the K-shell. This internal conversion electron is ejected immediately, leaving a vacancy which now needs to be filled. An electron from a higher energy level will move to this spot, and when it does, an X-ray or Auger electron is then released. This second vacancy will also need to be filled, thus causing an electron cascade.
So annoyingly, I couldn't find a video that explains a simple nucleon excitation, de-excitation, other than they said it. But to be clear, is usually explained for the nucleus before you get to higher levels of quantum, is that it's generally just a ball of the nucleons, of the protons and neutrons, and then it's enveloped by a cloud of electrons that are all in these orbital shells that are weird probability spaces and defined by its wave function. But there's like a ball of the nucleus in the center. But what was really going on is that all of the nucleons, the protons and neutrons, stack up in another set of different cloud shell orbitals. They take on the exact same quantum states as the electron shells, but they do it to a different shape because they have much different masses and the force has different parameters to it. But just like an electron can be excited to a higher electron orbital with a photon, and the electron drops back down from the excited orbital, it emits a photon. Any one of the nucleons in the center, in the nucleus, in their orbital shell model, they can also be excited to a higher energy state while still being in that nucleus. This is what's known as a nuclear isomer. If they're stable, where there's like a nucleus, a specific type of nucleus that you can excite one of its nucleons to a higher state, and it makes that nucleus stable, versus it might not be stable without that excited. So it's kind of like make an unstable nucleus, but then lock it as stable by exciting one of its nucleons to make it a stable set, even though it wouldn't be a stable number of regular isotope. To kind of give a subtle analogy here, take a look at me pointing. If you watch this, what happens here, the move I do, it kind of gets the whole like orbital motion gets unstable, and it's almost as if like you'd have to like shoot it with a photon right at that point where it becomes unstable, and it like locks the poi into a new orbital stable that is stable, that the rest of the motions can stay stable with it without, smacking me in the face and then I drop everything, This is important is because those nucleon excitations, the energy drop, equivalently in a electron orbital shell, the energy drop, it's pretty large, but it's not like crazy. But the excitation drop, or the energy for the nucleon excitation drop, is extremely massive, like crazy massive, that energy to weight ratio is that you can like store in a nucleus. To be clear, it's not just unstable isotopes that are locked in as stable isotopes as an isomer with an excited nucleon. It can be regular stable isotopes that just have one of the regular nucleons excited, but that energy drop is huge. It's like even relative to what we know of nuclear fission and nuclear fusion energy releases. This can excite one of the nucleons in depending on what isotope or material or specific one that's being used. The decay half-life of it can either be really long or really short, so you can store energy in these isomers or these excited nucleons, but you would need it into an isomer that's a stable isomer. In 2019, I had at least drawn this, but I figured this out a lot earlier. So I had been working on the turbines. This was one of the very first ones I had. Maybe you can see through it. Yeah, you can see through it there. This was supposed to be a 2-stage, kind of like this, but it was just missing the center. So it went into these small ones right here, and then there's holes inside of here. You can't see that transition between the 2 stages. Well, the point of all this was, one of the original design features that I had to put into this system was that I had come up with a thermoelectric disc stack, where each of the discs of the turbine was made of a different type metal. If you look here, I'll point up a thermoelectric. You use 2 dissimilar metals, and you have a connecting tips, and then you have them connecting at the bottom. And what this would require is alternating conductive and non-conductive star washers that provide every other connection. And then up at the top here, we do alternating conductive, non-conductive spacers. I have mica spacers and I have copper spacers to do inside of here. Ignore the blood on my hand. These discs get sharp. So what this point of this was when you have a Tesla turbine, the fluid does expand first in the nozzle, but then it still has a chance to expand through the spiral pathway going through the turbine. If that motive fluid is expanding going through the turbine, that means it will be cooler by the time it gets to the exhaust in the center. What that means is there will be a temperature thermal gradient from the tips of the discs to the center of the discs. As such, with this thermoelectric disc stack, with the proper alternating star washers that are conductive and non-conductive and alternating tip conductive and non-conductive spacers, this creates a thermoelectric circuit that the radial temperature gradient across the disc stack from the tips to the center generates a DC current flow through the axial direction of the disc stack that snakes up and down. What happens here is you take this current and you discharge it so that this tube is separate from the center shaft, so that the positive goes to this center shaft all the way to the outside set of plates, and then the negative goes around the tube on the outside and goes to this set of plates. So there will be whatever the potential gradient of voltage across the disc stack here generated from the radial fluid temperature gradient will produce a voltage potential across the second stage disc stack, which is then used for electrolysis of any remaining fluid. We're already going to have this natural thermal gradient, so by utilizing this to make electricity with it, it actually turns part of the turbine into a solid state electric generator. Why that's cool is that means inside of like a plane or a turbine or a turbojet engine, before the turbine's even spinning up, you could use the disc stack as an electric generator to power onboard electronics or whatever you want inside the thing without having to actually have the turbine even spinning. That's the whole point, was that it has 2 ways of making power. Once with the rotational mechanical power, and twice with the thermoelectric effect across the disc stack. Corollary, then using that disc stack in a many disc stack electrolysis device, you then get a thermoelectric hydrolysis Tesla turbine that uses the thermal gradient from the radial tips to the center to produce a DC voltage potential. And now the math I had done was I needed about 5-inch discs and about 100 of them. Basic calculations, experiments that I found online, been able to produce X amount of voltage with a single strip of metal that was about the same length. And I did the calculations. About 100 discs with an 80 degrees Celsius temperature gradient should produce about a half a kilowatt and be able to attain at least a 1 to 3 voltage potential. And if you know electrolysis, you need about at least 1.4 volts. So this disc stack should be able to generate at least exactly enough voltage to start electrolysis of any sort of condensate that's flowing in the exhaust of the gas turbine, and or if this is a steam turbine and this condenses anywhere. If you check out my other video up here, I have what's called as the interstage heat exchanger. Makes this tubes here be a bunch of extra discs that go up much further here that allow for external air to come through, go through the extra outside discs, and that cooling, the air coming through, provides cooling. It cools the flow of the fluid that's going through the center here, and the natural rotation of the turbine allows for it, like the discs that are out here provide the heat exchange area and provide the way of wicking, or provide the way of pulling the air and pushing it through, because the disc stack on the outside here works like a blower or a compressor. So the whole rotary system spinning, hot fluids expanding through here, going through here and out to here. This would be isolated from here. You can see this better in my video, but having this interstage heat exchanger, we can remove heat from anything that's in here. And of course, we can continue to do that thermal gradient radius, thermoelectric stack of all the discs across, so that this temperature gradient here further adds to the power output here, or the voltage out here. But if you cause some of the steam coming through here, I think the test I had looked at was an 80-degree gradient from 200 to 120 degrees Celsius. And as such, if you can cause any of that steam inside here to condense via the interstage heat exchanger, which preheats combustion air with the heat wicking off the air it's being flung through it with the rotors, that then this moisture that's condensed in here goes into the electrolysis disc stack for electrolysis to be burnt in a second stage turbine. And then this disc stack here also works as a second stage high vacuum pump on the exhaust of this. And then this can be doubled up. You can make it dual-sided so that from there you have positive on this side and negative on this side. So you can collect only hydrogen on this side and only oxygen on this side. As well, it also works as a compressor for it, because it's a disc stack compressor. Separate, so you don't have to worry about any sort of combustion at all. The really cool part about this is beyond all of this, I even further then took this interstage duct I turned into a vortex tube, because the fluid coming in is going to be rotating, and as it decreases in radius, it's going to spin up, as this whole thing is already spinning too. But the fluid going through here will speed up in its rotation as it comes here, and you will get it. Again, this needs to be long enough. I did it short for the sake of being on the paper and clarity. But having this vortex tube means only the hot air will come out here, and the thermal energy can go towards some of the electrolysis. It won't be a lot, but it's some. But why this is the most important is that the colder air is then sucked through, or pushes its way through the slight vacuum, that the inner half of these discs works as a second vacuum pump. So like this is a really large one, but these inner discs allow it so that the fluid comes through here, and then this little short distance of the disc stack it won't be a lot, but it'll keep fluid going out. As the discs rotating, it draws it out, and then it comes out here. But out here then, the fluid being drawn through here will be cooled, which will further cool this side of the thermoelectric gradient so that you get an even higher potential output. This was my big, huge idea that I came up with years ago, and I'm literally just still trying to get these going, because once these are all finalized, I can start mass producing all of this. And I'm steps away from being able to get there. And now where this finalizes at, I had then further designed this so that this was just a solid cylinder, if you will, so that fluid coming in does the thermoelectric here, goes to the vortex tube, comes out to the electrolysis disc stack. You produce oxygen and hydrogen between the two disc sides. Obviously, there's going to be a bunch of little thin discs inside of each of the stack. I didn't draw them, so for clarity, again, over here, you'll have just as many of the discs here as you would in this side and this side. So what happens here is you get oxygen on this side, hydrogen on this side. The hydrogen is separated to here. The oxygen is separated to a pre-cooling chamber. And so basically, I turned that whole section here in between the two stages into the flame tube or combustion can. that shrouds the center part here. So any heat produced in the combustion of this oxygen and hydrogen goes out to here, and I made it so that these are the Tesla valve rocket rotors. So that all of the combustion from this combustion can that goes actually down the length of the multi-stage rotor ends up burning and then providing reactionary force out. I just did this for clarity here, but you'll have an input of fluid in here that's coming out, and then all your excess goes out this way. So thermoelectric in cools this tip, creates a bigger gradient, produces more hydrogen and oxygen here. Those two are separated. They are then mixed and burnt down the length of this inner combustion can, and then go out radially and then tangentially around the rotor in the opposite direction, so that the fluid exiting the rotor provides torque in the drive direction with this. So this input will be pointing this way, but the exhaust of this rocket rotor will be pointing the opposite way. So torque from throwing the fluid that way, torque in this direction, and then the fluid from spinning in the turbine gets torque in the same direction. So you get the reactionary that way and you get impulse this way all together. And now this could be further separated. You could slide these down. You make this as long as you want. Make this like a 4-foot tube if you wanted. Scale it up, whatever you need. You can see right here, this Tesla valve rocket rotor provides a reactionary torque in the direction of rotation with the Tesla turbine, which is impulse driving in the same direction.
Once that water turns into steam, it has no other option but to escape through the tiny nozzles placed in the arms, arranged tangentially to the center of rotation. These arms act as micro-rockets that propel the entire device around itself.
Yeah, this turbine is not a great way of producing power, but it's a great way of demonstrating how reaction turbines work. Tiny rockets propelling stuff around itself. I should probably put that on a t-shirt. You heard it here first. Don't forget to subscribe.
And where do you think he heard it from? Tesla valve rocket rotor. So you get thermoelectric, hydrolysis, and reactionary combustion can, flame tube, mixing, and Tesla valve rocket rotor, and thermoelectric out exhausts through here. This could be steam and hydrogen all done in one. So you have steam input. The steam input and temperature gradient from the steam input will build up hydrogen and oxygen inside the rotor here and then burn it for more torque, which is, again, this is heat gradient from the rotor that wasn't getting used to begin with. So by utilizing that heat gradient, you're making use of some of that energy to produce some more fuel that wasn't going to get used. And also you're going to get the highest friction heating of the discs from the fluid at the tips. So that'll further add to the temperature gradient alone. Steam input only, and then when you burn the hydrogen and oxygen, well, you get more water, so it just makes more steam. All of that then goes to a vacuum condenser. Ta-da! Thermoelectric, hydrolysis, disc stack, combustion can, Tesla valve rocket rotor, steam, combustion, hydrogen, turbine for both rotational mechanical energy output, and if you want, you can even siphon off some of the DC voltage potential across the whole rotor here.
So, this is Charlie, and what makes him special enough for me to make a video about him is the fact that he built this weird turbine.
If you check out Integs' recent video, I'll put it up right here, by doing his gyroids inside of his electrolysis or hydrolysis machine, and then by the end of his video, he decides to start using a bunch of thin discs because you get a ton of surface area. That was the whole point of this specifically. This was my grand idea that I came up with years ago, and I've been building to it, but haven't gotten there. And I'm sorry, Joel, but you made your video, and I'm like, okay, man, I gotta tell people. I'd already made a video about this years ago. It wasn't very well explained, but I needed it for the timestamp, and you can see it up here on my YouTube channel. No one will ever see it, but I posted it there so I could get a real timestamp of when I actually came up with this. Hope you guys enjoyed that.
This was a good idea, but it was short-lived. It works, but just for a while. It doesn't matter, because I just realized something. This is not the best way of getting the most surface area of a certain geometry. Just think about it.
If you have a cylinder, the best way of getting the most surface area in there is to stack a bunch of very thin discs on top of each other that are separated by a very small gap. Half is connected to positive, the other half is connected to negative, and ta-da! Perfect generator. My lattice is contained in a cylinder of 60 millimeters in diameter and 100 millimeters in height, and it has about 132 square inches of surface area. To get the same area with 60mm discs, provided that I use 0.1mm sheet steel, I would only need 15 discs to get the same area. Even if I use 2mm spacing between them, that would only be 32mm high. For the spacers, I could just use an outer ring with holes on the perimeter, but the steel discs are too thin and need support all over, and not just on the outer edge. Instead, I designed the 1.3mm thick gyroid spacer. In this way, the disc has support all over, and because of the unique geometry of the gyroid, the gas doesn't get trapped. I am actually pretty proud about this design. The spacers I printed in my Form 4 in batches of 10. That was easy. The hard part was removing all the support material by hand. It took me an entire morning to do that. So this works like this.
Now where do you suppose you came up with that idea?
You heard it here first. Don't forget to subscribe.
Do you know?
Oh no!
I determined I didn't need to know. I was already cleared at such a high level, handling presidential material. Original shape most likely was like a lenticular.
Lenticular. What does lenticular mean?
Disc-like craft.
It's a disc-shaped craft.
You know, with like two dinner plates smushed together, right?
Tesla disc turbine.
Classic. Like, yeah.
Saucer.
Disc propulsion.
Like that.
Like that.
It's true.
So that was the first time I ever saw something like that. Keep in mind, I never followed this topic, so every time I'm seeing one of these videos, I'm kind of seeing something for the very first time. So lenticular, whether it's a disc-shaped craft, or it's a wedge-shaped craft, or a boomerang in some cases, these were all new to me.
Then why the heck are we even relying on you for any of this if you don't even understand what you could be looking at, if it's regular human technology or not? If this is all new to you, and we have, like, this literally called a monowing.
It was very, very perplexing.
Gee, if I didn't know better, it almost seemed like these guys were running cover for the defense industry companies and not actually our government.
And obviously, to our military pilots, it was very concerning.
True.
But it looks like the edges broke off, so it became this like bell-shaped thing. And there was nothing in it. It was like just an artifact, you know. It's like Dave needs to disclose to a government official who, what, when, where, why, where the shit is, who's in control of it, what are the cover programs.
Counterintelligence.
Cover for Tesla disc turbine. The flying saucer. The whole confidential project was built around a Tesla disc turbines, and you want
cover program
to give the illusion of like aliens or whatever nonsense. You take
Jeremy Corbell.
Toss it in the air.
You could infer that.
You could infer that.
Yeah. And that's what deemed my complaint credible and urgent in July 2022.
How many times have you been told that Tesla turbines don't work? Can't produce power, have no torque.
Credible and urgent. It was sent to the Director of National Intelligence, and then it was sent to Congress in December of 2022. And it's a crazy story why it took so long. Credible and urgent in July 2022.
System for being able to do liquid fuels and gaseous fuels at the same time. Holy cow, this thing is putting out heat!
Does anyone else think it's like super weird?
My complaint, credible and urgent in July 2022.
How many times have you been told that Tesla turbines don't work? Can't produce power, have no torque.
Does anyone else think it's like super weird?
You could infer that.
You could infer that.
Yeah. Which is a credible and sufficient in July 2022. Yes, was about reprisal too. I filed that separately eventually.
By using small amounts of throttle, the driver is being gentle on his vehicle, and just as important, he's being considerate of the surface on which he is traveling. Drop!
Good as a fast car, a flash house, and a gold-plated dunny to me. Absolutely no good at all. I've been put on this planet to protect wildlife and wilderness areas, which in essence is going to help humanity. I want to have the purest oceans. I want to be able to drink water straight out of that creek. I want to stop the ozone layer.
Won't make it.
Your head is in the clouds. You're delusional. Dreamer!
Get a job!
You're boring.
What if it doesn't work? You think you're better than us? Give up. Weirdo!
I don't like you. You are so weird.
Just give up already.
Why are you even trying?
Art form, ridiculing people.
It's my destiny.
It's a vast area, and I think Andy and I have sketched out sort of our plan of attack. We're going to start in
Jeremy Corbell.
Then we're going to move up into the mountains toward
Travis Taylor,
where we've gotten all these reports of this Skinwalker Ranch. Put some
special agent with the Air Force Office of Special Investigations.
Ready to go.
good luck, fellas.
Makes sense. It can't be true.
I got all kinds of questions about like functionality, like how it works, and it's just a really unique.
Call me. And everyone else, check out my Earth Network playlist. It's right up here or down here.
You can come up with whatever theory you want.
The more you fuck around, the more you're going to find out. I hope this lesson is helpful.
Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
Incredible and urgent in July 2022.
Wonder why? It's just a coincidence. If we
See what you've done. I don't know who you are. I don't know where you are, but you may want to start changing your ways. Or changing your name.